Warning: the following podcast, which contains strong language and mature content, is unsuitable for children or for the faint of heart. The subject matter discussed will be frightening and graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
When you wanna hear about the paranormal, you get the Spooked Girls. True crime that makes you hypothermal. With the three Spooked Girls, stabby snippets will give you dreams. Tara and Jessica will make you along with the Spooked Girls. Bring on the slaughter, we on that haunted ground. Spooked Girls. The three Spooked Girls.
Hey there, Spooksters, and welcome back to another episode here on Three Spooked Girls. My name is Jessica, and as always, I'm joined by my favorite gal pal, Tara.
Hey, Spooksters.
Today, we are going to do another recap of another documentary that, well, when I first saw it, I thought it was something completely different, and then it turned out to be an adventure and a half. So we'll get into that. But before we do, you can hang out with us on social media. Our handle is at Three Spooked Girls in all of the places: Facebook, Instagram, Threads, all the places. We also have a Facebook group, Three Spooked Girls Official. It's where we do a lot of stuff. And also, just so that you know, in case you haven't heard, we've started a Discord.
We have, yes. Join. Or
So
message us, because the link expires, so message us if you want it.
Oh yeah, do that. We will definitely hook you up. It's great. I can actually understand Discord because it's kind of a lot like Teams or Slack. And so I'm like, oh, this makes sense to my brain.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I got this. So definitely check that out. For those of you spooksters who like to read, we do have a book club. It's the Spookster Literary Society. We pick 2 books a month. We have our main read, which is just any book that we decide. And then we have our feminine rage. For January, we read Salem's Lot for our main read and Carrie for our feminine rage read. And then we will announce the ones for February soon. I know one for February. I don't know the other one.
Oh, I could tell you. So,
Ooh.
yes, our main read is London Seance Society. It's the sequel to The Lost Apothecary. We do polls with our main reads the last couple months, and I feel like that is just the easiest way to go about it. And then our feminine rage read is Slewfoot by Brahm, and it's on KU, so we love that. And yeah, I'm really excited. I've heard really good things about it. So witchy stuff. Yay.
Yay. I'm excited about it. So if you want to join us, go ahead and do that. And if you want to help support the show, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/Three Spooked Girls. For little as $1, you get a bonus episode each month. 5 and up get ad-free episodes that drop the day before. Check it out. I'm really excited about January's Altier. We haven't recorded it yet. And so Tara's going to be pleasantly surprised and giggle her pants off. And I hope you giggle your pants off if you're listening to it.
I'm so excited.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive on into this episode. We are recapping a documentary that you can find on HBO Max. It is called They Called Him Mostly Harmless. It is a different type of, just like kind of warning people, it's different than we normally recap. It's like true crime, but not true crime.
I mean, I would say it's true crime. It's true crime for sure. Yeah, it's solving a John Doe case. So.
Yeah, there just wasn't like, when I say crime, I mean there wasn't like some sort of like murder that happened with
Yes. Yeah. It's not a murder documentary.
No,
right.
It's like recovered body situation. For those of you who have been a long time listeners, you may remember a couple years ago, we reviewed a documentary called The Devil You Know. It was the Pazuzu case. It took Tara and I quite a long time to recap that one because of Pazuzu himself. Right. But the director of this, They Called Him Mostly Harmless, is Patricia Gillespie, and she is the one who directed that one. So same. Okay, it starts off with a 911 call from July 23rd, 2018. So not that long ago. It was like just a little bit ago. The call comes from Big Cypress National Preserve, which is in South Florida. A hiker had found a tent, and when they came up on the campsite, they like looked in because, you know, there's nothing really happening. You kind of walk up on a campsite. You want to make yourself known so that you don't startle someone. And when they got up close to the tent, they saw a dead body that had been extremely emaciated, and they called 911. Then we meet our main detective, whose name is David Herm. By the way, I was so smart this time. I looked up everyone's name and wrote it down.
Oh, good. Look at you.
That was growth. I was like, I'm going to do this before I start.
So profesh.
That way, if I'm like, I don't remember this person's name, I can be like, look at my list.
Actually, I do.
I do know the name of this. So Detective David Herm, he is like the sheriff or the detective at the, I'm going to say this completely wrong, Collier County Sheriff's Department. He works with them. He describes the area as, it's like I said, Southwest Florida. It's in the middle of the Everglades, and people typically, I guess, don't camp in July in the Everglades because it's hot and wet and gross.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've been to Florida during that time frame, and it is very humid, very hot. Yeah, no.
He
thanks.
described it as wet, and I was like, okay, which is like for my neck of the woods, you camp in the summer because it's not wet. It's the opposite. So that makes sense. The police go out and they, like I said, they find an emaciated body. Typically, when they find a body that has been that emaciated, there's no resources with it. There's no food, there's no water, there's no money, nothing that would typically lead to something like a resource to help this person. However, when they found this body, they found money, food, and water. And this person obviously had the resources. They weren't destitute. They weren't in quote unquote trouble. They had resources. And this really stumped the police. Also, there were 0 IDs. There wasn't a phone. There wasn't like a license, a passport, and a bill in this person's name, nothing. Like there were notebooks that were also in the belongings. And the notebook was also like written in computer code. And
which is very unique.
Right.
Like not like the general population's gonna know how to do that shit. It's more than MySpace coding. So
oh my God. We were talking about MySpace coding at work the other day. And I was like, where did this knowledge go? Like we knew how to do it for MySpace and then it's just gone.
I couldn't do that anymore. Like legit. Left my brain.
Right.
I don't know how we did it.
No idea. So also in the notebook, there were like advanced math equations. So they were like, this person is either really disturbed or really a genius. And they were like, we're going to find out eventually. Also, I love that the detective was like, well, we're just going to like take this person, take him in and run some fingerprints and find this person. And we're going to be done in a couple of days. It's not a couple of days, people. Strap in. It's going to be a minute. Now, like weirdly, like if you're just like, okay, what's happening? And like you blink at this point, you'd be like, why are we looking at a dry cleaning commercial? Because it cuts to a dry cleaning commercial.
It does.
And it's a dry cleaner is called like the Puritans, and its particular branch is in Richmond, Virginia. And there's a woman who's like delivering dry cleaning, and she's like, by day I'm a delivery person, and by night I'm an internet sleuth. Also, I'm just gonna preface this: you're gonna know if you've listened to this show before, you're gonna know I don't like her. So
no,
I can't hide it. I'm not gonna hide it.
Her true character comes out towards the end. So
yeah, for sure.
You guys will, if you haven't watched it, you'll understand shortly why.
Oh, 1,000%. Oh my gosh. But also she was like, this job is not for the faint of heart. And then she goes, I've been in 3 wrecks. And I was like, you're just a bad driver.
Literally, we internet sleuth for the last 6+ years, and I've never gotten in an accident.
Oh, because she meant the cleaning.
Oh, shit.
Driving.
Yeah. My bad. Also, I haven't done that, but you know.
But I delivered pizza, and the only time that I ever like kind of got into an accident is when I accidentally ran off the road into a mud pit, and then those people who I delivered their pizza to pulled me out with their truck. It was amazing.
You see, that's fine. That's a positive experience.
And then the next day I went to Hawaii. It was amazing.
I love this. Perfect. You're like, bye.
Exactly. So this person that we're speaking of, her name is Christy Harris. If you're listening from work and you realize I'm talking negatively about Christy Harris, it's not the Christy Harris from my work. We love her. Would never say a negative thing about that woman. But this Christy Harris, I got lots of bad things to say.
Yeah, this bitch. Fuck that.
Right. So Christy wants to be a detective in the worst way possible. So she goes online and she finds these like Facebook groups, which I'm not shitting on these Facebook groups. I think they're great. I think with people wanting to help, internet sleuth is fantastic. It's helpful. It gets the word out faster.
Well, and like think about it too when we did Into the Fire. That
Right.
I can't remember his name, but that guy, like he kicked off all that stuff for Andrea. So it's like they do good. It's just people who take moderating too seriously.
I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our moderators for not being crazy. We love them. They're great.
Yes.
Okay. So she goes and she joins this like Facebook group, and it's about like unidentified people. And there's this person in there, and it's this John Doe. And she's like, I'm going to help solve this case. You can tell that the way she acts is like, the only way this case is getting solved is if I solve it.
Oh my God, no,
that's
so spot on. Like the fact that she explains that every single thing had to go through her, people had to get permission to contact authorities or talk to people. Like, who the fuck are you? First of all, like, I'm sorry. If someone's trying to do something helpful, like, what? My brain was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Get off your fucking high. I'll be an asshole. I don't give a shit. Get off your fucking high horse. You're just wanting this for the credit. And when we get to the very end, I feel like I'm proven right with how this documentary ends. Yeah.
1,000%. So now we cut back to Detective David Herm, and he gets the autopsy back. Now, I'm going to let you know, I'm going to kind of like cheat a little bit and tell you there was like at least one big inconsistency with the autopsy. When they weigh the body, I'll say this, the John Doe at this point in the story only weighs 83 pounds, but he's like a big dude. Like he's a tall person.
Crazy. Yeah.
And I'm like, 83 pounds? That's so like, I can lift that.
Right. I think my 12-year-old weighs more than that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But there was no like evident trauma, or like when they ran his toxicology report, he had like Tylenol in the system. So there was no like big substance that maybe he was like tripping on and like just forgot to eat for several months. And there was no disease that popped up. But there was a tiny little scar. Or that's at least what they say. That's the inconsistency. Later on, if you watch the documentary, you like see the scar and you're like, why do you call it a small scar? But then I started thinking, maybe they have like a X amount of inches makes it like a small scar, X amount makes it a medium, makes it a large. And I'm like, maybe these people just have a really different scale of what large is, because I'm going to be honest, this is South Florida. Gators bite people. They might have a big difference in what a large scar is compared to me.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say if there's like anyone who's a medical examiner listening or what have you, like I would love to know, because that's pretty valid. At first my knee-jerk reaction was just like, are they stupid? Did they just not give a shit at all? But actually that would make sense. So yeah, I'm hella curious.
Also, I was thinking that like he's emaciated, and they may have like did it initially and like the skin tightened. So maybe it looked small, and then maybe they rehydrated some of his skin to like get fingerprints and stuff like that. But then they maybe rehydrated that part to get like a clearer picture, and maybe it grew and they just didn't update the file.
Is that a thing though?
I don't know. I was just trying to think, why would they call it small? And like, those were the two kind of examples. Again, not a medical examiner. I would think that they would do something like some sort of like hydrating solution, because they have that to like for fingers, so that they don't just like soak them in water now and do it. It's like there's a hydrating solution.
That makes sense. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm learning today. I love this. Okay.
So police ran the fingerprints, DNA, and dental records through both local, national, and global, and they got jack shit back. They were like, this person doesn't exist. It's a random person. They don't know who it is. According to the database, this person had never gone to the dentist. And I was like, okay, gotcha. Well, of course, they don't know who to like compare it to, which I was kind of like, isn't that what you do, is like you get dental records once you know a person? Like, how do you do that on John Doe? I don't know. I was like, not a doctor. That's not correct. Not a detective. So then as we go on in the documentary, we meet a woman by the name of Kristen Adams. Her title is criminal research investigator. She asks them what they want her to say, and they never actually answer. But of course, according to IMDb, that's what they put her as a criminal research investigator. So basically what happens is when they run all of the DNA tests and fingerprinting and nothing comes back, they hand it off to her, and she starts researching through like missing person databases and other types of databases. So she basically runs through, can't find anyone that matches his description. And so she creates a flyer, and they have to go off what they had. So like really their description of him is going to be a little off because of the weight. He has a beard. So like people don't know like what stage of beard people know people at. I wrote in my notes, they make a flyer, right? And they edit the photo because they have a photo of him, which is the photo of his body. And it's emaciated. When someone dies and the skin kind of like dries out, it retracts, and his jaw was open. So Christy makes her first fucking snide ass comment in this thing, which is she said that he looks like the caveman from the Geico commercial.
I'm like, wow, way to show your empathy and start to convince me that you're doing this for good intentions.
Right.
Like sarcasm, if you guys can't figure that out.
Tara and I spent a lot of time watching this, writing each other back and forth. One of us saying a statement about Christy and the other one writing, right? I know, it was crazy.
She gonna piss you guys off in this. That's where I'll stop.
So then the police work gets back and they release the flyer to media and on social media, and they just kind of get it out there, which is how this ends up in like Facebook groups, like the one that Christy is a part of. And also, you know, like other local groups. Obviously, this person was a hiker because they had like hiking gear with them. So they put it in hiking groups, and a woman by the name of Carrie Fairbanks sees it. So the body was found on July 23rd. This is now August 2nd of 2018. That's in the future. My bad. 2018. I will get there. I promise, guys. And she opened Facebook and she sees this flyer and she's like, oh my God, I know that dude. And so right in this moment, you're like, oh my God, we get to find out who he is. No. Kelly is what you call a trail angel, which is basically someone who kind of like lives near trails or is around trails, and they like do kind of short day hikes type thing. And they give out goodie bags with like water and just snacks and, you know, maybe bandages, something like a hiker might need, like a through hiker might need, because this is along the Appalachian Trail. That's really nice. That's very sweet and kind.
Thoughtful. Yeah.
Right. And she's out there and she's like walking one day, and this person like starts walking towards her, and she's like, hey, how are you? Like, I'm Kelly. And then he's like, I'm mostly harmless, which when they say it at first, you're like, oh my God, what does that mean? Why do they call him mostly harmless? But it's because that's his trail name. And she says that he got the trail name by walking into a campsite, and they were like, oh, you can come join us as long as you don't bite. And he jokingly said back to them, oh, I'm mostly harmless. So they like thought it was funny, and they started calling him mostly harmless. And it is a thing, like, not to brag, but I read the book Wild. If you've watched Gilmore Girls, The Year in a Life, you know the controversy between the book and the movie. I've never watched the movie. I've only read the book. Just saying. But that's, you do. They give you trail names. And so someone is just known as this. And it's kind of part of this community that you probably know their name, but you don't actually call them by their name. And along the trail, there are these like trail books. And like you would sign, like he would have signed like mostly harmless was here. And so that is your hiking. Like, again, you would see like, oh, mostly harmless is here. Oh, they signed in yesterday. I could probably catch up to them. You know, those type of things. And she thought it was weird because she asked him like, oh, so you're hiking around here. Do you have the Florida Trail app on your phone? And he goes, oh, I'm not carrying a phone. And this is 2018. We all had phones.
Mike, I don't even have a flip phone.
No.
You
or like
nothing.
A satellite phone in case you get up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, nothing.
And she asked him, like, why don't you have a phone? And he said he wanted to disconnect. And the best way to disconnect is to not have a phone. I'll be honest, like, there are times when I'm at an event or something and I don't have my phone on me. It's almost like, oh, I don't have my phone. But then I get back and there's like 9 million text messages and I'm like, I don't have my phone.
Right. It's nice in the moment, but then it's overwhelming when you got to check everything.
Oh, for sure. So the police at this point, when they find out this information, because Kelly calls the police and tells them, they're like, okay, so he's out here like intentionally doing like just walking through the woods with no phone. So like, could he be a criminal? Like, could he be running from something? This is what they're posing in their mind. Kelly said he was really nice and really like a okay guy. And she had these stickers that were like for the Florida Trail system. And she's like, will you hold the sticker up? So she takes a photo of him. So now we have like a before picture, if you will. Of him. And she basically starts posting it. She gives it to the police so they have it. And then she starts posting it in all of these like Florida Trail Facebook groups. And then everyone's like, oh, they have the flyer and then they have this picture and it just blows up. And so people start like posting pictures and videos with him. And it just kind of happened that people were like, oh my God, I know him. And I know him as like mostly harmless. Or then we find this person, his name is Brandon Jewell. And he hiked with him for like a day. Brandon was like one of those kids who probably didn't have like a lot of, he admits he didn't have a lot of friends. He was kind of like by himself. He'd gone through some abuse as a child. So he really looked to the trails as like a place for him to kind of like reconnect with himself, kind of heal. A lot of people do this. This is a thing. That's why the book Wild exists. Literally. It's a woman who was grieving the loss of a life. And she's like, fuck it. I'm going to walk the Pacific Crest Trail. So he was out there hiking and he goes to this like little like campy place and he bumps into this guy and they just kind of like hit it off. But this dude introduces himself to him as Denim. This is the second name we'll know him as, is Denim. So you're going to hear me refer to him either as for a while at least, Mostly Harmless or Denim. They'll be interchangeable depending on who I'm referring to talking about him. They start chitty-chatting. He starts kind of telling him some information about his life, like that, you know, he's from Brooklyn, that he's into sci-fi and girls and all this stuff. And they just kind of have this like conversation. And a lot of the hikers that encountered him heard the same thing. They either heard that he was from Louisiana or the Bronx or from Brooklyn, that he was into computers, just things like that. And, you know, you never really know if this is real. Like, you don't know if people are out here telling the truth or if they're just kind of making things up, but they were taking it as face value. It was overwhelmingly people on the internet were like, oh yeah, no, I met him. I have a picture with him, but I don't know his name. And this was happening like a lot. Like, it was like a small group of people like in Florida, and then it grew to bigger because it kept getting passed to these Facebook groups. So like thousands of people were like, I saw him, met him, have no fucking clue who he is. Like, could not tell you his name. But the really great thing about this is that because all these hikers started like calling in and like letting police know when they encountered him, they were able to create a path and a timeline of Mostly Harmless's, like, of his journey, which is great.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Like, even with barely any info, at least it can kind of get them to hone in, you know, where he was.
Which is why they were kind of like, yeah, he's probably from like Brooklyn or the Bronx, because it was like up north that this had kind of started. So they're like, this makes sense. I also love that they just like threw this out there, like 3,000 people attempt the Appalachian Trail every year. And I'm like, oh, those 3,000 people, they don't tell you how many succeed, just attempt. Then we meet another person who I just adore throughout this whole thing. Her trail name is Magpie, but her name is Marge or MJ. She's kind of an older lady. She loves to hike, and it was so cute because she was like talking about how like when she'd go out on the trail, like young men like in their 30s and younger were like, wouldn't give her the time, like not time of day, like, hey, but like even to talk to her, they'd be like, get away from me. And they'd like in a hurry. So she ends up meeting she knew him as Denim. She meets him in October of 2017. She was out hiking one day and she kind of met him, and he was like willing to talk to her. And it was so cute because they just like, you know, she just kept talking to him and vice versa and whatnot. And because she's like, when I was 68, I decided to hike the Appalachian Trail. And I was like, good for you.
Right? I was like, that's amazing.
So she met him 10 months before his death. So she met him in, like I said, October 2017, and they were having a conversation, and he asked her, hey, why do they call you Magpie? And she's like, oh, because, you know, it's like a big loud bird, but I don't like shiny things. So I guess he like reached into his little trash bag and like pulled out like a shiny gum wrapper and handed it to her. And he's like, here, yes, you do. And, you know, it was really cute because like in this moment, like the person that she knows is just like this really sweet dude who's just like kind of making her feel good about her trail name and making her feel like good about who she was. They ran into each other a few times in this little like area. He would like pop up in this cafe or on the trail or something like that. And they would have these conversations. And of course she knew him as Denim. And they were like sitting around one night and they're like, Denim, what is your name? And he kind of just acted like he didn't want to tell them his name. So they were like, what if we guess it? And she said that they just went down alphabetically. And she says that she remembers him telling her what his name was, but she doesn't remember it, you know, probably because like they were playing an alphabetical game and like it probably was something like, oh, that's my name. And they're like, ha ha ha. And then they just went back to calling him Denim. And she could kind of tell that he wasn't an experienced hiker because when they ask him why his trail name is Denim, it's because he started hiking in jeans. Now, for those of you who've never hiked, you don't hike in jeans. It's a no-no.
No, that sounds miserable.
Oh my God, the chafing alone.
Don't do it. You know what that makes me think of is like people who go jogging in jeans. I'm like, are you a psychopath? What is wrong with you?
Yes. If you haven't hiked, you should probably have either hiking shoes or hiking boots. You should have lightweight pants, lightweight clothing because you need to carry it. And he also had a really big pack. Like most true like through hikers, like those type of people who like hike, they have a normal size pack, but it's not like overflowing. It's not bulging. Don't think Lorelai Gilmore. She had too much.
Yeah.
She had too much. And because of the way like trail hiking works, a lot of times either people carry cash with them and when they go to town, they like resupply and they just buy things, or like in the book Wild, she mailed herself stuff to different places early. Certain post offices would like hold hiker shit. And I wonder now if trail angels do it. Like if you could like, if you kind of get to know people through the online community, like if you could like mail like your shit to them.
Oh yeah, I would bet some of them probably have like PO boxes and stuff.
Where they would like get
yeah.
them and then like bring them home.
Yeah.
And then like meet somewhere in town, like, oh, I'll meet you on this day. Like you'll call me and I'll come bring you this thing, you know?
Yeah.
That would make sense. So they just kind of knew that he, at least starting out, wasn't an experienced hiker. And they decide, okay, he has like all this gear. Like he has nice gear. It's fairly new. It's expensive. So he spent a lot of money on it. They release images of like his tent. And thank God the person who sold him the tent was like, I sold him that tent. I'm from Georgia, blah, blah, blah. They sent over the receipts from like the time period that he would have bought it. And unfortunately, he bought the tent in cash. So that's not helpful because cash is not traceable. That's why a lot of people use cash for things. But right next door to this like sporting good place is like a hostel, and a lot of hikers stay there. And one of the rules at the hostel is that you can't just check in with your like trail name. You have to use a real name. Granted, they didn't verify with ID, just so that you know. So we finally get a name. On November 22nd of 2017, Denham signed in as Ben Bellamy. Also, there's no other information. It's Ben Bellamy and his name is Denham, his trail name, and that's it. There's no email, phone number, anything. Police contact, they look up, they find all the all the Ben Bellamy. They're all alive. So they were like, oh, that's a dead end. They're like, he's putting a lot of effort staying off the grid. If he's checking into a hostel under an assumed name, he has essentially no virtual footprint at all. There's no digital footprint. This person is just someone in the wind. So then the police are like, what else do we know about this guy? And they're like, oh shit, we have this notebook that he's written all this code in. So they published that to the internet. And lucky for us, a man by the name of Nick Thompson saw it and was intrigued. He, at the time, was the editor-in-chief of the online magazine The Wired, and now is the CEO of The Atlantic. In his email, he has this thing he calls the special, like the secret tip jar. And in there, he had found that there's a hiker who wrote computer code and was really into his own privacy, which is a lot in that like tech community. They're big in privacy. So he's helping try to figure this out, and come to find out the code that he was writing is to a programming game called Screeps. And basically, it's not a game like you go in and you play, but what you do is you write a code that protects your fortress from being attacked, and then your little proby thingies go out and attack other people. And once you put the code in, it just continuously plays. So you can go in and update it and things like that. But for the most part, it's just constantly running. So I'm pretty sure his is probably still running to this day, is what I'm kind of getting at. People, once they figured this out, were like, okay, if we can like reverse engineer his coding, we could figure it out. And they tried and they couldn't do it. So then people from the Facebook groups, which I was like, why didn't the police reach out to this place? Because I feel like if the police had reached out, this might have been a little bit of a different conversation than like, hi, my name is Jessica, and I am from this Facebook group, found this post online, and I'd be like, if I was like a company, I'd be like, okay, fuck off. Right?
Yeah.
But they were like, we're not going to give the random people in the Facebook group information on this. So they were like, okay, we have nothing again. And at this point, Mostly Harmless has done a great job of erasing his digital footprint, which means he knows how, because that's not an easy thing to do. We talk about the fact that like just having your phone, you have a huge digital footprint because you have some people like have IDs on there, you have your bank on there, you have your social media, you have just emails, all that stuff. Like it's all there, but he doesn't have any of this. And then we go back to Christy, our least favorite person in the world. Christy will work a full shift of delivering your dry cleaning to you and then go sit in the office at that company because they allow her to. I hope that they allow her to, and she's just not doing that. And they're like watching this documentary like, you steal an internet?
Oh my God, can you imagine?
Right. So basically she gets off work and then goes and sits in the office and like online sleuths, which is fine. That's a good hobby. She really wanted to be an FBI profiler, but when she was young, her house burned down and that didn't leave them with a lot of money. So she couldn't afford to go to college. So Christy was just like, I wanted to do this. So this is what I do in my spare time. So she channeled all of that energy into what she quote, finding people's loved ones and such and so on. Something was not sitting right with Christy in this moment. Mostly Harmless was not, to quote her, was not getting internet famous fast enough, which I was like, I don't like that terminology when we're talking about a deceased person.
That was a really interesting phrase to use with a situation like this.
Yes, I agree.
Like you could have said Mostly Harmless is not getting the media attention they deserve or he deserves, like
the case wasn't getting enough traction.
Yes, there we go. I was trying to think of that word. I'm like, I forgot how to speak.
It's okay. No, but I remember when she said it, like, because I've watched it twice because I always watch it first and then go back and take notes. The first time I saw it, I was like, huh? One, I don't think he wanted to be internet famous. And two, no.
Yeah. I know this is making light of this for 2 seconds, but every time she said or did something like that, I just imagined the red flag guy running back and forth through the field.
Yes. Yes. Bring on the red flag guy. So I will say that the Facebook group did start really looking at this, like, the Facebook group as a whole was like, there's not enough traction because now at this point in time, Christy has become a moderator for this group and there's not enough traction. So the Facebook group started calling, which I was like, this is a little weird, but okay. They literally started calling from Maine all the way to Florida. They started calling every single county and were like, hey, there's this missing person from Florida. And I'm in like the tip of Maine and be like, I don't know that I would be like, I think I'd be a little weirded out if someone just randomly called me. Like, and it wasn't like a law enforcement agency. It's just a rando.
Right, exactly.
Like, did you do it? Is this you? Did you do it? And Dave Herm, who is the detective on the case, said the first 6 months, they had a lot of information that came in. They got a lot of tips. Most of them weren't helpful at all. They were like, not a thing. But they were like, we've exhausted all our traditional tools. What should we do? And there was a podcast called Sworn Statement, which handled local, like Florida cases. And they had the case go out on there. I think it was definitely at least a 3-episode arc. It may have been more that launched in March of 2019. It got traction because people, listen to podcasts and true crime is a huge genre and it got people listening. And then we get to meet who I loved throughout this entire episode or this documentary. Her name is Natasha Teasley. She would classify herself as not a true crime enthusiast, but an outdoor enthusiast.
I love her. Yeah, I like her.
So good. She had basically, because his case had been put into, trail and outdoor type Facebook groups, she had found this case that way. And she found the group that Christy moderated. And so she became a part of it. Again, at this point, when Natasha joins, there's no other moderators but Christy in this group. And it was really interesting because apparently they had a lot of theories. Natasha calls the Facebook group chaotic at best. Like, that's me paraphrasing her, but there were a ton of theories in there. Everything from Denham being, or Mostly Harmless being, an alien, a time traveler, an international spy. Someone said that he was Amish, which that actually, I was like, okay, that tracks.
Yeah, because they would more than likely have very little to no digital footprint. So
right. And it would also be why, like, maybe he was hiking in jeans because he just walked out from his Amish lifestyle and went to the store and was like, I need clothes. and bought jeans. But someone also said that he was blind because in one photo he was standing really close to the board and they were like, he couldn't see, so he died because he couldn't find his food. No, his food was literally like in the photos that they show you of the food, his food was like at his feet. It was very easy, he could have found his food. So the police were like, you know, some of these were helpful, some of these not so helpful, but they were taking in every single tip and treating it seriously, which I appreciate from a police department, especially if you're getting a shit ton of wackadoos. Like if someone called and was like, I'd like to say, I think he's an alien, I would have been like, thank you for your call, have a wonderful day, and just hang up before that next sentence came out of that person's mouth. But they treated every single thing that came in with, they were serious. And honestly, the police were like, the hiker community is what's going to get us information. This is because these are the people who interacted with him. They will know him. Now we learn more about Brandon. I kind of spilled the beans a little earlier. Brandon said that he started hiking at 17. He started going out on the trail at that age. It was to escape an abusive situation. He had a stepdad from the age of 3 who was extremely abusive to him. He said that they were walking and they met, that he could tell by the way that Denham looked, that he looked like he'd been out for a while, if that makes sense. And he met him about 8 months before he went missing, or before he died. And they had this long conversation, and Denham alludes to the fact that he had just recently gone through a big breakup, which Brandon was like, this tracks. This could be the reason why he's out hiking, is that he had this big breakup and his life like fell apart. And so he just needed to do something to like heal from that. And Brandon said that they bonded because of the fact that their fathers both abusive. Denham said that one time his dad, in this conversation, he said that his dad like drug him out into the yard and tried to fight him. And I guess Denham just like walked away. Also, I really love when Brandon starts talking about his stepdad and he goes, my stepdad, Rob. And he goes, oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name, but fuck that guy. And I was like, yes, Brandon.
Yeah, I was like, clap, clap, clap. Relatable.
I know. I was like, yes, fuck Rob. No one likes you, Rob. You're rude.
Yeah, fuck off, Rob.
Fuck off, Rob. And the other thing that he said that Brandon said that was really kind of unusual is that Denham ate a lot. Like most hikers don't eat a ton because they're like, which I'm like, this is when you should be eating a lot because like you have to walk a lot.
And hydrating. Don't forget to hydrate.
Yes, please. It's like when you go to Disney, like this is my Pacific Crest Trail or the Appalachian Trail is Disneyland. When you go and you walk around and you're like, I'm going to walk 25 miles today. I better eat enough carbs to make that 25 miles. Mm-hmm. And then the people out there are like, I ate 3 pieces of jerky and 2 peanut M&Ms and I passed out. I was like, when I read that book, I was just like, no wonder you got so skinny.
Right? No, duh, you passed out.
Well, cheers, Ashton. I'm really pushing for everyone to read Wild. It's great. It's life affirming.
Okay, fine.
I have the audiobook if you want to listen to it.
Okay, fine.
She loses toenails because she doesn't have the right size shoes.
Oh no. Oh my God.
And so, which is why in the book, I'm just derailing for a second. In the book, she literally loses a shoe. It like rolls away from her. And she's like, I just didn't have the energy to go get it. So she had to get new shoes. But in the movie, Reese Witherspoon like throws the shoes. That's why they're like, in the books don't throw shoes. In those shoes. It just rolled away. But you know what? Good job, Reese Witherspoon, and like making something dramatic. And also my heart goes out to her right now because her house burned down. Mm-hmm. Okay, back to previously scheduled programming. So Brandon and him camped together. They got up the next morning. They like took down camp and they started walking. And they get to this point where they're like going to split off. Like Brandon's going to go back to like where he lives and Denham's going to keep going. And Brandon was like, hey, do you want to stay in touch? And he said that Denham looked kind of sad, but he was like, kind of shook his head and was like, no. And that made Brandon sad, but he like understood, like, you know, this dude's out here living a solitary lifestyle. And, you know, I think Brandon probably thought, well, like, I'll run into him again type situation. So when they kind of hear Brandon's story about Denham, they're like, okay, this is what's happened. He has this like abuse. He's just probably doesn't have a family because of it. Because like, if the story is true that his dad tried to fight him in the front yard, it would make sense that his family's not looking for him because Denham probably walked away from his family. They're like, okay, Natasha is like, I really want to like reach out and connect with more hikers, really get into hiker groups, really like focus because these are the people who've interacted with them. And Christy is like, no, we're not doing this. Everything had to go through Christy. And according to Christy, the hikers were pretty much useless.
It's because she was afraid of not getting credit for solving it. I'm going to say it now. That's what it was.
Hercules. Yes, exactly. She was like, I have to find who he is. And it's like, no, someone needs to find whoever. It's not a competition. It's a man's life.
So gross. So gross.
And like Tara said earlier, everything had to be run through Christy, like law enforcement, what you could post. Like she was denying things, which granted, moderators should. Like our moderators do that in our Facebook group. If someone posts something that we're like, oh, no, they are great and they catch it. If it's borderline, they're like us. Tara and I have a really dark sense of humor. So sometimes we're like, let it roll.
Mayhem.
Right.
No,
Thank
this
you,
is
Ashley.
different.
No, I know.
Yeah, totally different because she just wanted complete control of this.
Mhm.
She wanted, I'm just going to say it, and I don't care. She wanted to make sure she was the one who got the credit for this. Like when you hear people talk about ethics in true crime and people doing things for the wrong reason, I don't give a flying fuck. That's what this woman is one of those examples.
Right.
Can't convince me otherwise.
1000%. And according to Natasha, Christy sent Natasha a message and was like, you can go fuck yourself. I've heard from people that they don't like you. I want to smack Christy.
Like, why are you going to start bullying someone who's trying to help you?
Right. Christy's
Like-
literally trying to act like she's the lead detective on this case.
Mm-hmm.
You are not, ma'am. You are not the lead detective. His name is David Herm.
Get your facts straight.
Right. So this is like, I wrote down, this is more about Christy's ego than actually finding out who Mostly Harmless is. And I think that Christy would rather it go on forever, never finding out who he is, as long as she's the one who's kind of creating the narrative.
So gross. So gross.
However, the Facebook group kind of revolts against her and chaos ensues. And Christy's like, fuck this. She took her ball and went home. Thank God, was left the group. So she leaves the group and Natasha's like, hey, there's no moderator. What do we do? And the admin of the group, who I'm assuming is just passive at this point,
You do it.
was like, the group can vote and see who wants to do it. And they all were like, pick Natasha. And Natasha's like, oh, so she was like, okay. It's so interesting because then we find out a little bit about Natasha's background. She is like I said, an outdoor enthusiast. She worked for like an outdoor like water sport company where like you rented kayaks and canoes. And she was really kind of like very engaged in this. No one at work was taking her seriously. And then she did a little sleuthing around work and she found out that all of the females at this company made $5 less than their male counterparts. You bad people. You bad people.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we mean when we say that women aren't paid equally.
Yep, 100%.
I would rather go rent a kayak from Natasha than some dude because I feel safer.
For sure.
So Natasha was like, okay, we got to get this shit organized. So she went through and she found all the photos and videos and everything, and they put them together in albums versus like just posts that were chaotic. Because you probably get like repetitiveness, right? Like if you don't have like one place where you put the photos. So they did a lot of organizing. And then Natasha's like, holy shit. Nobody has reached out to the last known person to see Mostly Harmless alive, which is a man by the name of Mike Gromley. I don't know what the fuck is up with all these people with the last name of Lee in the end, but it's a theme throughout this case, guys. So basically, he's kind of an older guy and oh my God, Tara and I have to talk about this. They introduce him and it is the cutest fucking thing. He is a caller for square dancing.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Cutest thing ever. I love it. And you know what? At first I'm like, why are these people so stone-faced while they're doing this? And I was like, oh my God, no, they're just trying to really do a good job because they know they're being filmed, because one lady accidentally like looked at the camera, broke the fourth wall, and I was like, oh my God, I love all of them so much. They're so cute.
I know. And then I was like starting to understand square dancing for a minute. I was like, oh, okay, I get this. And I'm like, it was so cute.
Flashback to middle school. I remember.
I know. And he was a good caller. Like he did a great job. I was impressed.
Oh yeah. Very pleasant tone. Loved the cadence. It was great.
And because they were like a little older, it was like a little slower. It wasn't like too high, but it also was just really adorable. And there was one couple who had like a matching shirt, and I was like, they must be married.
I know, I loved it.
I was like, I'm here for these people. Also, can we just get a documentary of their line or their square dancing? I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Patricia Gillespie, get on it. I need to see this.
You only have to give us like a 30-minute thing if that's all you got time for. Just do it.
Or if there's some sort of fucking scandal in the in the square dancing world. Crack that nut. We need it.
Oh my gosh. Yes, please.
The things we didn't think we need. But anyway, Mike's trail name is Waterboy, and he is also considered a trail angel of sorts. He, in 2015, 2016, decided that he was going to attempt to walk the Appalachian Trail. And when he said that, I was like, sir, you kind of not young, but okay. If you think you can do it, I'm here for you, sir. Maybe like physically you'd have to lean on me for a bit, but it's okay. I'll be here.
Man, that's just like something, thinking of him and Magpie, that's just like something you hope you're healthy enough that you could do if you wanted to at that age. So I'm like, kudos to you guys. That's badass. I love it.
I know. I've been like, I need to start a walking group. So he was out hiking on April 13th around that time of 2018. And it was like 85 degrees and swampy and gross. And he's like, I want the fuck out. And then he got out to the road and he decided to hitchhike back. I do not recommend, I must say this again, I do not recommend you hitchhiking. This was very lucky that he wasn't picked up by a murderer. So have you not learned anything about people in Florida? There are murderers there. Eileen Warnos is from there. She murdered people. So she gets off the trail. He hitchhikes. And as they're driving, this guy who's like in the pickup that he's in was like, hey, there's another hiker. Do you want to stop and talk to him? And he's like, sure. So he gets out. He probably gave him some water, stuff like that. And it's really interesting because like these hikers just take pictures of each other. They're like getting photos with one another. They're like, this is my new friend, my new hiking pal. And so they kind of like exchange things and they're talking. And he noticed that like in the photo too, you see that he like Mostly Harmless has like roundy cheeks. Like he, as Mike calls him, plump. His cheeks were plump. And so he was like, he was a well-fed individual. This wasn't some guy who was out there like starving on the trail. And he noticed that his pack was really big. And he goes, why is your pack so big? And he goes, oh, I have winter clothes. And Mike is like, hey, if you want to give them to me, I'd be happy to mail them somewhere for you if you want me to, or like keep them, like that kind of thing. And Mostly Harmless was like, I think I'm gonna keep them myself. Can you just like point me in the direction of a campsite? And so he gave him this campsite. It's like 5 to 7 miles away. And that's the campsite that they literally found him at 2 months later. So they weren't sure if what happened was suicidal or an accident, but Mike kind of feels like, why would you keep your winter clothes if you were going to go kill yourself? Like, wouldn't you just like give your clothes up and be like, here.
Right.
This basically what he's saying is this was someone who was planning on using his winter clothes when winter came around. Then we flash back to Christy. She talks about how she uses true crime as a way to escape. She lives with her sister. I'm not quite sure if her sister has special needs, just kind of alludes to it, just like the way that she speaks to her. But Christy being not kicked out, but like ran out of that other Facebook group. She starts her own. It's something like nameless. Like it's basically like nameless, something unforgotten or not never forgotten.
Right. It's specific for this case. The other one was like more broad, right? Wasn't it? Or like all, yeah. And this one's just this case.
I think it started as just this case. I'm pretty sure she's probably like dropped other cases in there.
Sure. Yeah. But at that point, it was the focus was for this case. Yeah.
Yes. So Christy does her Christy's Facebook group. I don't even say it was Christy because she can't even say she did it. It was someone in the Facebook group that she had. They did a Freedom of Information Act and they got all the case files. And this is where they see like the autopsy pictures. And Christy was like, oh my God. But obviously she like posted them too. She posted all this shit because it also got taken down, like not taken down, but like pirated over to Natasha's group too. Like someone was like in both and was like, yep,
a mole,
if you will. And this is where they were like, excuse me, small scar, that is quite large. And you see the photo, it looks quite large. People were like, why would someone have this kind of a scar? It's on the abdomen. And I'm like thinking of a lot of reasons someone might have a scar. Like maybe they were in an accident. Maybe they had their appendix removed, like pre-laparoscopy procedures. Maybe they had a really bad surgeon and just cut them really big, things like that. And they were like, maybe he has cancer, which led the internet sleuths to Google Appalachian Trail and cancer. And they came across this blog by someone by the name of Ben Reynolds. And it's essentially like an online diary of this person who's dealing with cancer going back to 2012 and thinking that they were going to die and succumb to cancer. Christy was like, we found him. It's Ben Reynolds. Well, we meet Ben Reynolds, whose actual name is Bill Powell. Basically, in January of 2020, people began to harass Bill. Like he said that 887 people had reached out to him constantly asking. People had messaged his parents. People had messaged like his spouse, like sister, like, is this Bill? Are you Ben Reynolds is who they're asking for. So Bill's like, okay, I'm going to join this Facebook group. So he joins the Facebook groups, and people are assholes in these Facebook groups because Bill is like, hey guys, I wrote under a pseudonym of Ben Reynolds. And people were like, prove that you're Ben Reynolds. And I'm like, why would he lie?
Right. What weird behavior. Like, what a weird reaction.
I also kind of think it was just Christy, just being really honest.
Yeah, low key, same.
But he was like, people like didn't believe him because it was separate names. But like, interestingly enough, that they were like, it's him because because Mostly Harmless wrote Ben Bellamy, and it's like Ben Reynolds. It's like, it couldn't also be that Ben Reynolds is a pseudonym, and Ben and Bill are not that far off.
Mm-hmm.
And Reynolds is a very common last name. So basically people were like, it's not him, or they were really rude to Bill, and he got harassed a lot. But interestingly enough, Bill has the same mic that Tara and I have, or I had, but Tara still has.
Yes.
I still own that mic. It's just part of a decor now versus being what I use to record. But Bill reaches out to Natasha, right? And is like, hey, my name is Bill Powell. I'm not Ben. I wrote as Ben Reynolds. People are harassing me. And Natasha was like, y'all fucking knock it off now. Leave him alone. And I was like, this is how you know Natasha is in this for the right reasons. Because she's like, not being a dick. She's like, be a good human being. We need to just focus on Mostly Harmless. Like, once people are like, I'm not this person, move on. And she shut it the fuck down. The police, people were reaching out to the police asking like, how did it happen? Why did it happen? And the police are like, look, that's not like, we don't think it's foul play. They'd ruled out foul play at this time. They were thinking something like happened to him. Like maybe he became unconscious or something and he just starved to death, or it was suicide by like essentially starving to death. And they were like, we don't need to know what happened. We need to know who he is. So enter two very fun and interesting characters, the Middlemans. Tara texted me during this part and she's like, why are they working out? But like, he's not working out. He's on his phone, but she's working out. I'm like, I have no answers. Their names are David and Kristen, and they own, the easiest way I can say this, it's like a bio lab, but it's specifically for DNA. And it's like DNA on fucking steroids. It's one of the things they say is that the average law enforcement agency runs between like, I would say like 10, maybe 100 markers in their DNA profile. They run like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. They run so many. And it's so funny because at one point he puts like the DNA up on the screen and it just looks like all these little lines. And I was like, you could tell me that's DNA or that's just a weird picture. I don't know.
Abstract art.
Right. Their company is named Orthrim, and they just like look really deep. I also love the fact that during this time, David sits down, super nerd. You can just tell this dude is like super proud of his company because he's like, did you get the logo in the thing? It's very important to get the logo. But I was like, wanted to be like, David, it's on your computer, like right in front of you. It's okay. But also like, he was like, does this look cool? And I was like, you just have the Samsung logo bouncing around on your TV. So no. But they find out about this case and they're like, this is what we could do. However, this is not a cheap process. And I know that some people will be like, why didn't they just do it like pro bono? But they work specifically with law enforcement. They can't do everything pro bono because then they would not be able to run their facility.
They'd go bankrupt. Yeah,
exactly. So they were like, it costs $5,000 to do this. And they're like, you know, the county was like, we can't afford that. And there's no family to run it. So there's like no family to pay for it. So David and Kristen had this idea of like, well, maybe we could do like a crowdfunding. And they approached Natasha about it. They approached the sheriff's department. And I love David. He was just like, well, it ain't my money and I can use it. So sure. They put it in the Facebook group and they asked the Facebook group to fundraise. And within 8 days, they had raised $5,000. And I love this type of thing where they like show you like what people actually say and they like put it up there and people are like, I donated twice, you know, things like that. And I'm like, I'm only here for it. And so they ship the remains from Florida. I don't really know. I think it's in North Carolina where their company is. They get the remains. And one of the things that really pisses me about the next part is it flashes to Christy and she's like, I really didn't care what they did, to be honest. And I was like, bitch, you care so much what they did.
You're just mad this wasn't your idea. That's what it is.
So Christy's group starts like talking shit about Natasha's group. It's really funny because David Herm, who's the detective, is like, I just don't get into the days of our lives bullshit that they're doing. But they're like, Christy's group is like targeting Natasha specifically, saying that she's trying to steal the money, that they hoodwinked you. This is just someone who's like predatory to like steal your money. And they say someone messages Natasha. My view is that it was Christy, basically that she's like a terrible person, blah, 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 and that she should go kill herself. And like literally they were like, you should go kill yourself so that this case could get solved.
Vile. Whether it was Christy or one of her little minions, vile. Ugh, gross. I can't.
You can't convince me it was either directly been like, we should do this to her, like someone should tell her off, and this is what someone should say by Christy. But Christy was definitely involved and knew about it. It was just it was gross. And of course, Christy is like, I really wanted to beat the science. So she gets this like email or some shit or whatever. I can't remember this particular time. Oh, this is what it is. Sorry, I should have kept reading in my notes. It literally told me. She gets this bright idea that she's going to go into one of those like love lost forums where it's like, you be like, in junior high, I loved this boy named so-and-so and I want to like meet up with him, like those type of things. So she put out like a picture of Mostly Harmless. She's like, I like knew this guy. I like want to find him, blah, blah, blah. And someone wrote back and was like, oh my God, I know him. And she's like, oh my God, she salivates. And she's like, oh, I'm so excited. And she gets back this photo and she's like, when I'm looking at it, I stare at it. It's basically like she's convincing herself that the person on the other end of the screen is this person. And she gets a name of Ron Newman. And the story is, which doesn't track with her My Lost Love bullshit, is that he had been kicked out and disowned by his family for being gay. So Christy calls the police, and I love Kristen at this point, Kristen Adams, who's the criminal researcher. She's like, it was like whispered in hushed tones, like someone, and I was like, did she think Natasha is like listening to her shit? Natasha lives in North Carolina. She lives in Virginia. Calm down, Christy. And so she sends over the photo, and everyone who sees this photo is like, what the fuck? It is literally a picture of a yearbook photo that someone has drawn a beard on.
I would have been like, is this a joke? Is this a joke right now? It looks like when someone goes and draws the little like devil horns and stuff on a yearbook photo. That's exactly what it was, but like with the beard.
Like a ballpoint pen artist drawing. And this is how desperate Christy was to be right and be first. Because when you look at it, I think if the beard hadn't been there, you might have been like, maybe like if he aged different, like, but it didn't look enough like him to really be him. But the fact that like somebody took that photo and I don't know who, it could have been Christy, it could have been the person who sent it to her, but like drew a beard on it. Just fucking weird, man. So Kristen Adams, who, you know, Christy is called, then looks up, finds this person, because, you know, it's a yearbook, so they know, like, they find the individual, and they call, and Ronald Newman is really confused of why someone is looking for him, because he is neither missing nor dead. But mind you, Christy has been all over Facebook like, I found him, bitches. I solved the case. And then in Christy's dramatic ass, she starts crying, and she's just like, I really needed this. And I'm like, However, the internet is also unkind to Christy at this point, and basically they're mean enough to her that she just is like, you know what? I'm done with the Mostly Harmless case. I don't want to deal with it anymore, and quits. And the world cheered for a little bit. If you remember early in the episode, I mentioned a man by the name of Nick Thompson, who is the journalist with Wired. He was the editor-in-chief, I should say. He had been following the story. He had written some stuff about it. And this was during the 2020 presidential election, and things were heated. So he was like, I want to live in a world where for like 2 minutes, it's not about this. So on November 2nd of 2020, he posted the article about how like they have all this information about this dude, and they have all of this like coding he's done, which is how it ties into Wired for being tech, but nobody can fucking find him. And he thinks, and I feel like rightfully fucking so at this point, because Wired is such a big thing that I was like, how do they not get this, right? Over 1 million people read this article. Not a single person contacted the police from the Wired article.
That just makes it even more baffling, and being like, how did this individual go that off grid that an audience that big saw or read about this case and still nobody knew who he was? That's wild.
So this is what's interesting is I like how Nick put this. He's like, it's so weird that 100 people who are looking into this case, no one knew him. And then it's 1,000 people who are looking into this case and no one knew him. And then 1 million people and nobody knew him. So they're like, fuck, we're at 0. Well, Orthram comes in clutch because how they work is it's not like how we think it works where they like pop up. They do have like relatives and stuff like that, but really it's kind of like DNA mapping of like places people grow up. So they had determined through this, and I love that they went into Natasha's group. That's Christy off so bad. They went into Natasha's group and went on Facebook Live and announced that he was most likely, the DNA showing that he has relatives and is from the area of southern Louisiana. Christy's super pissed because she doesn't have access to it. And she kind of acts like it's unfair. Like, this is real unfair. He has someone in Natasha's group is also in Christy's group and tells her. So Christy is like, I can't let this go. I'm not going to let this go. Those are her exact words. And she said it in that kind of tone. So she unquits. She goes back into her group and is like, do you guys want to do this again? And they're like, yeah. So all the Facebook groups start, which I think this is brilliant. This is like everyone was doing this. They were going into like Facebook groups specifically for like South Louisiana. And they were just getting accepted in there and like bombarding it with like, hey, there's this missing person. Does anyone know anything? And they were just doing this. Wired. So Nick Thompson is actually, because like, if you know anything about marketing, you do targeted ads. He was doing targeted ads to people in South Louisiana. He was like, I will find this person. All of these people are invested. And on December 16th, somebody puts a comment on Christy's post. And I'm going to say this. This is my rant. Here I go. Christy is just the first person to read it, not the person who solved this case.
Yes.
Because people also put the same information in Natasha's group. Christy was just the first to it. So someone had put in there and was like, hey, I know who this is. I'm going to email you this stuff. I know the story. And this is in the part that Tara mentioned earlier, like you can see the motivations behind people's actions. This is where you really see Christy's like true colors, because it's all about like, I did it. I found him. This is me. I feel justified for this is what I meant to do, which she says later in the show. But it's like all this weird bullshit, right? And Natasha is like, okay, here are the facts. We found out who he is. We found out his family. You know, it's really great to be able to put a name to a person, because his name is actually Vance Rodriguez. And they contact the police. I love that Christy says, I screenshotted it to the police and everyone else. And I was like, Christy, you guys can't see I'm like claw marking my microphone right now. But the police get a hold of his information. They track down his family. They say they just like literally closed the, you know how like small town this is? They closed the sheriff's department to make a phone call. That doesn't happen in most places. So they go and they like close the door. They call his family and they're shocked because they haven't heard from him in years. They don't have a relationship with him. As far as they know, he had moved to New York. Basically, people were coming out of the woodworks and being like, he worked with my husband at like this place called like Shoppers something. I can't remember exactly what it is. I didn't write it down, but it was like an IT place. I kind of feel like it's like Best Buy, like Nerd Squad or whichever Nerd Squad is at. That kind of stuff, right? Or Geek Squad. That's what it is. Not Nerd Squad. Come on, Jessica. Shows how often I go to Best Buy. But they were starting to realize that Vance had told the truth about himself, that he was from Louisiana, that he was in tech, that he lived in New York. And so people kind of were feeling validated. This is where the end of that validation really ends. They found out that Vance was a bad, bad man. He was not a good person. When he left New York, he paid 6 months of his rent. He walked out of his apartment, leaving everything. Literally, he left his passport, his IDs, wallet, everything just fucking vanished. So Nick Thompson is like doing journalistic stuff. That's how he found that out. And then he also found out there was a woman who lived in the building. And when he like questioned her, she found out that that Vance had been in a relationship. They were boyfriend and girlfriend, and that there was abuse there. And Nick said that he didn't probe, which I understand. Like when you're cold calling someone being like, hey, do you know who this person is? It makes sense that like if someone's like, it was abusive, that you're not going to be like, tell me about that abuse. So no one come at Nick Thompson for that.
Yeah, he's being respectful about it. You could tell.
She isn't the only one. At least three women, if not more, have come forward and have said how abusive he was. One woman's mother took to Facebook and wrote that he was so abusive and cruel to her. The word she used was cruel, that he broke her daughter, that she was broken. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so terrible. The next part is kind of hard because it's like Brandon, who had like idolized this man who like came into his life and was kind of weirdly like a positive in the moment, where he felt like someone saw him. He never refers to him as Vance. He refers to him as Denim. He goes, Denim was kind to him and he listened to him. So it's really hard for people like reconciling. I will say that he literally will say on there, no one should hit anyone. Brandon takes a very firm stance on it. I don't want you to think he's being an apologist. If you remember Kelly way back, who kind of like started this whole like mostly harmless thread of it, she said she was very sad to learn that he was abusive because he had been kind to her. And then there's fucking Christy, who's a fucking an apologist. She's like, I don't know that he did those things that those women said. As someone who plays victim her whole life, like, how are you not there for victims?
Because she's not doing this with good intentions. We know that at this point.
It made me so mad. I was like, what? Natasha was just like, I was so appalled when I learned these things about him. Because really, truly, you want this to have this amazing story behind it. I think people were thinking what they were going to find was that Mostly Harmless was this guy who lost his family and was grieving and was just like this gentle soul that was just out healing. That's what people wanted. And it turned out he was a shitbag who was abusive. And so people are like, well, we just spent all this time trying to figure out who this person is. And he did not live up to expectations. It was interesting because MJ, I think, said it the best. She was projecting who she thought he was because who she met. And I think people can be two things. And when he met MJ, he was a kind person who saw an older woman on the trail and decided, hey, I'm going to befriend her. But he also was a shitbag who abused his exes. She was like, I was projecting who I needed Denim to be. I needed him to be this nice, kind, sweet young man. And the way the public was portraying him was this like handsome hero that something just went awry. But Nick Thompson says it best. He's like, no one was looking for him because he was an asshole.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you're probably wondering why like Mostly Harmless is kind of an ironic name. There is a book called Mostly Harmless. It is part of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I feel like I read it a long time ago because I read that series, but I don't remember it. But it's a book and he had been quoted. He like had read it and quoted it on a Slack forum for that programming game scripts. But I like how Nick kind of like puts it. It's like, if someone is mostly harmless, you're also at least a little bit harmful. And he was saying that like, at least it was kind of like him being self-aware of his past with trying to live a better life. And that's kind of what Nick was kind of like projecting, because they're trying to, I feel like these people are like, I'm trying to find this like scrap of something to be like, we put all this effort into this case. And, the family didn't want to talk about it. The sister made it very implicit that he didn't want to talk about it. Friends of Vance when he was younger said that his father was abusive, but he wouldn't really talk about how his father was abusive, just that he was abusive. An interesting thing is that he was legally emancipated at 17. So there had to have been some abuse there because courts just don't let 17-year-olds go off on their own for no reason. Kind of what some other people said was that he had mental health problems. He had what they called or would classify as outages, where he would just like stop taking care of himself for like days, weeks, months at a time. He would stop eating, bathing, anything. And so they're thinking that this is kind of like the state he was in when he died, is that he went into one of these outages and just never came out of it. And like, because he was on his, like when you're in college and you're having this, or you have a girlfriend and you have this, someone's probably like, you need to eat, you need to get in the shower. Someone's forcing you to do things. But if you're in a tent by yourself, and you haven't talked to someone in weeks, no one's forcing you to eat. And so you might have food right there, but you're not. The scar is revealed what happened. He did not have cancer. When he was 16, he shot himself. He went out into a field and shot himself in the stomach and then realized that he did not want to die. And he drug himself up to get help. And so that's where the scar came from. Kind of what was told is that after he tried to commit suicide, his parents wanted to get him help for his mental health. That's why he left. And that's they possibly think what the fight was about was that maybe his parents were trying to force him into something and he didn't want it. Now I'm just going to flash to the people who were part of this journey. It's so cute to see Brandon. Like, he looks like he's a preschool teacher, and he looks like he's a good preschool teacher. There's like this little slope at the school, and he takes like, like little bins, like Tupperware bins that are like, I don't know, 3 or 4 quart size, and they ride them down the hill. I'm like, that's so adorable. And it's interesting that he's like, I could have been him if my life didn't turn out the way it did. And I'm like, good. I'm so glad that because Brandon has like, I don't know if she's his wife, but at least a significant other. And they're so cute together. Oh my God. She was cooking and he was like rushing her to do something. And she's like, stop rushing me. And he literally in a Russian accent, it was like, everybody's Russian. And I was like, oh my God, stop it. You two are cute together. And it made me so happy that like he has a fulfilling life. Vance's family did bring him home. They shipped his body, the remains, home, and they buried him and had a service, which I was like, that's probably some closure for his family, which, people need. My favorite ending of this all is Natasha's ending.
I love it.
She left that abusive company who was paying her $5 left, and she opened her own company. It's called Two Sisters Adventures. So if you're in her area, like, please go rent a kayak from her and make sure that she stays successful, because she's adorable and I love her. And I love the fact that she opened her own business because it was her dream. And she was like, I think this kind of thing puts perspective. Like, you could spend all this time and a person could be shitty. You might as well live for today type thing. She was like, I probably won't internet sleuth anymore, but she does sometimes for funsies. Christy, I don't even know how to talk about Christy. She has like an emotional reaction to being like, I'm so glad I'm the one who solved this case. It's what I was meant to do, blah, blah, blah. She's like in the middle of like literally the credits start rolling and then Christy comes back on. Weird. And it's like, she's talking to this person on the phone. Like, this is like probably like 4 minutes of just chaos, and it's edited too. So like,
probably much longer.
Yeah. So she's on the phone with someone and they're like talking about a case. And she's like, oh, just so that you know, I'm sitting in front of a filming crew. And then all of a sudden she was just like, oh my God, what the hell? And like, she gets up and she goes outside and like, the crew is like repositioning the camera to get her when she comes back in, and she's like bawling, and she's like, they just called about this case and there was like someone's decapitated. And then her phone starts ringing and she looks at it and like immediately just fucking switches. It's not even like, oh my God, let me collect myself. It's like, oh, what? And then she starts talking to someone. Tara's theory is really smart. She told me in a text message that she thought Christy was auditioning for her second documentary.
Oh yeah, 100%. I absolutely feel like that was what that was, because I'm sorry if her mind wasn't going that way at least a little bit. Like, you wouldn't be answering your phone in the middle of a documentary interview. Why is your phone even on you? I'm gonna go that far and say, why is your phone even on you?
Right. And I don't even want to play devil's advocate and be like, here's the reasons why I could be. I don't care. Tara's right. Like, you're sitting down with a film crew to film about this. I'm just like, there's so many things that like could be said about Christy, but I'm not going to, because I will rise above her.
Yep.
It is true. Like, the thing that really does make Tara and I really mad is when we like find individuals within the true crime community who really use true crime to like bolster themselves. Not like someone who wrote a book or something like that, but like someone who's like making, like, this is all like this whole thing. Yes, exploited. Everything is about Christy. It's not about Vance. It's not about finding who he was, whether he's a shitbag or not. Shitbag people deserve to have their names and their families be notified, because otherwise, like, could you imagine like Vance's parents would have gone the rest of their lives never hearing from their son and never knowing why? They might be like, he really truly hated us this bad, and we don't know. Like, Vance may have changed. I don't know if that people like that change, whatever, but like, it sounds like he was a different person out on that trail than he was at home. Maybe the trail is where Vance needed to be, because maybe he was less of a dick there, but no excuse for what he did to his partners. So that's a weird note to leave this on, but that's where I'm going to leave it, because yeah, again, this documentary is called And They Called Him Mostly Harmless. It can be found on HBO. It might be found in other places, but that's where I watched it. Is that where you watched it?
That's where I watched it. Yeah.
It was good. Like, overall, it was very well shot. It was very well done. I didn't think that the overall it was exploitive. I just think that Christy's exploitive, which I think is good to show, so that people can be like, don't be this person. In a world full of Christys, be a Natasha.
Yeah, I appreciate this project because not only does it show that side of internet sleuths and true crime and what have you. But it's also interesting to me because there's always that kind of like, not, I don't want to say joke, but there's that conversation of why are these victims always, they light up a room and they're the best person ever and things like that. So I feel like having the subject be someone who obviously was not a good person in life, I think humanizes true crime as well in a way, if that makes any sense. I feel like it's good to show all these different angles because you have to think too, the like documentaries and Dateline and all of those, you know, everything's very planned out and very produced. So it just shows that the people that created the show, it shows the intention behind how they told the story, because we all know there's plenty of documentaries that take out all kinds of stuff. So, you know, this could have been played out a very different way. So I appreciate the honesty with this situation. But yeah, it was an interesting watch. It's very different than, you know, the stereotypical documentaries, but I think it's still worth a watch for sure.
Oh, for sure. I will say that Pileana Terra, the integrity it takes to tell a story that ends with someone being a dirtbag and not someone who lights up a room is also a hard thing, because people could be like, why are you telling this story? This person's story doesn't deserve to be told because they were a shitbag. No, this story was unique because of the fact that like it took 2 years of active people. Like the police department didn't stop. This didn't turn, I mean, it was a cold case, but it never stopped being worked. It shows what happens when police take things seriously, when communities take things seriously, how you can, like this person, like Vance didn't want to be found and people found him. And it shows really the true kind of like the true magnitude of like online communities and how, you know, people go missing, how people get saved because people are out there looking. I think it was really good. And I look forward to seeing, I hope Patricia makes more documentaries because I've liked the two that I know I've seen, I liked. So
yeah, for sure.
Which is interesting because her two subjects have been really like not good people. Like Pazuzu was an insane person. But yeah, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for the day. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you back. If you're a patron, we'll see you tomorrow for the all-tier episode, and bring your giggle pants because it's going to be fun. Anyway,
can't wait.
Toodles.
Bye.